We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Did you miss us? Because we got more StarCraft coming your way. I am Fear Dragon still, joined by Nathanius here on the desk. How's it going, Nate?
It's going fantastic.
How was your break?
You know, I'm really glad I get to start the day with the break, because for me, it takes so much energy to build up for that StarCraft, all that passion. I liked that last match, getting to see some Thor usage, by the way, on the new patch.
Yeah.
It's very fun. Weren't really the key part for you, Thermo, to win, but I like seeing that.
It's a cool idea, because it's the thing that everyone's been saying, like, well, just the Thors have this range, and they can beat the Colossus with these range units, maybe like the Tempests and stuff. You know, we didn't actually see Tempest. Maybe the Thors would have fared better versus them, but we'll have to find out maybe next time we see you, Thermal. Hopefully you're on the desk for that one. But yeah, for this particular game, we do have, of course, as you guys can see back here, Bly versus Rail. I'm really looking forward to this one. Both of these players do not play the meta, so this is just going to be anyone's game.
It's two memers going up against each other is basically what we've got, and I'm interested to see if Bly's going to break anything out with the new Nidus Swarm, right? The changes to that, the unloading faster, the way that it's been tuned a little bit, I think is really cool. If you can get it off now, it seems to be a lot more effective than previously since you can kill it while it's building. I don't know exactly what to expect out of Rail, but any match with Bly, I'm like, well, just whatever you think is going to happen, just throw it out the window. It's going to be a weird match.
So I was talking to Rail before the match. This is like just kind of saying like, oh, how you feeling about your group and stuff? And he told me some stuff, and I was like, okay, well, I'll hold off saying any of these things of like your games versus Bly on the ladder, how they've been going and stuff, or what you're expecting, because I don't want him to like feel like, oh, you know, he listens on the beginning of the broadcast. He's like, oh, okay, I'll make sure I'll just go do that. He's like, no, you can say it. I believe it. Swarm hosts are impossible for me to handle. I lose all of my games versus Swarm hosts. I'm like, okay, you're like giving away your weaknesses right now, man.
That?
He says Bly loves going Swarm hosts right now.
There are people who still lose to Swarm hosts. Nice.
Bly, apparently, his ZvP is just all about Swarm hosts right now. So I'm expecting to see Swarm hosts.
That's great. We were just having a discussion about the weird feelings that that Swarm hosts can give people with all the holes on their backs. So
yeah, right?
Yeah, so for those of you who are ready for some nightmare-inducing fuel, we've got it coming up with some ZvP. It's so good to be back here doing WCS here in winter. You know, this frigid winter here in especially out
Burbank,
here in the studios. Burbank, man.
Really doesn't live up to the name, man. There's very little burr in Bank.
It got down to like 14 degrees Celsius, man. I was freezing to death. Can't believe
What's that in American? I know we're on the European broadcast, but I need the translation.
52, 53.
Oh my God. Can someone from production get me a jacket?
Yeah.
Feeling chilly just thinking about it.
I've actually got fleece and wool pants on. You just can't see it under the desk because I have to keep myself warm. It's terrifying.
I love it. All right, guys, we are moving into Kairos Junction for game number 1 of our second best of 3 for WCS Winter. We're going to be starting up here at the top left-hand corner of the map, top of the red Zerg player. He is none other than Bly. Team Blazer.
And he is facing off against our blue Protoss player in the southeast. He is Rail.
Team Jira. Most successful player on that team. But yeah, let's talk a little bit. So we talked a little bit about Bly. I was saying how Bly likes to do that kind of funky stuff with Swarmos, or at least that's what Rail was saying. Rail is a fascinating person to watch because this guy is what you consider the ladder hero. And I say that as to a lot of people will say like ladder hero is like, oh, this is a negative thing. For me, I run a tournament called Ladder Heroes. It's a compliment.
I was going to say, if there's anybody who's an authority on ladder heroes, it would be Fear Dragon.
Thank you. And of course, Rail is this guy who plays an absurd number of ladder games. He puts in the time and the effort.
He's a grinder.
So a good comparison point is last season, because I run this tournament and everything, and it's all based around ladder standings and stuff to qualify for monthly finals. And I track how many games everyone's played because that's part of like how I do the rankings. So Rail played roughly 1,300 games. The next most number of games played for the players that were playing in Ladder Heroes was around like 800, and it was Showtime. So I'm like, you know, he almost doubled.
Is that because he plays more than everybody else, or is that because his games are shorter?
It's probably a bit of both. Because, I mean, you think about Showtime, it's like, oh, this guy's a macro machine, all that kind of stuff. Rail, he has a lot of these all-ins and these weird kind of builds, but not all of them are super duper quick games. I think a lot of them are still the 10, 15 minute 25-minute games.
I think it's fair to say that a lot of us expect Bly to, if he doesn't do some sort of G's, his games usually go pretty long.
Yes.
He's not one to shy away from, if it even is that Swarm Host composition, moving into something like Broodlords with Vipers and playing the late game. Lots of Queens, something that we typically expect out of European Zerg compositions. But Rail opening up here with the robotics facility. And I think a lot of players, you look at this, Stargate still very popular in PvZ, the utility of the Phoenix, the Oracle. It's an interesting call. Do you think with the Sentry, maybe he's planning some sort of sharp attack? Does he do stuff like a Warp Prism play?
He does love that kind of stuff. I've actually been seeing, so I'm not going to lie, I've been doing so much StarCraft in the month of January with like playing catch up on ladder heroes and people coming back from vacation, so I'm finally scheduling all that stuff. It's been a bit of a haze, but I believe that it was Rail that I saw going for all these kind of fun, super fast Immortal Sentry pushes, as well as also going for like some fake out pushes that lead into a third. This is the thing about Rail that I think sometimes frustrates people or his opponents, is that I don't think he's the kind of player that says, I'm going to play a way that I can play every single game and is safe against most things that you could do. He's the guy who says, I think you're going to do this, so I'm going to do something that will probably lose to like 40 or 60% of what you could throw at me, but versus what I think you're going to do, I think I'll win.
Yeah, I love it seeing the players that can mix it up a lot, because it gives us this fun part of the matchup where we can still expect that he could go for one of the more standard builds at any point in this series, but it's also just a great contrast, I guess, with Bly, since we never really know what Bly is going to do. It's trying to understand him is just, it's like he speaks a different language than us, even though he plays the same
He does
game.
also speak a different
He does
language than
also
us.
speak a different
I mean,
literally.
he speaks English, but he also speaks a different language.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess in the language of StarCraft.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Hallucinating a Phoenix to get that high ground vision, picking up the Overlord since he didn't go for the Stargate opening. Of course, the Overlord still saw the entire army composition, so he knows the double Immortals are here. Third Immortal on the way. That's interesting. Usually it's 2 Immortals and then a Warp Prism, but he's just going to be adding on a few more gateways and now getting up that. Oh, actually, wait. Okay, yeah. Did finish the third Immortal. So this is the 2 big 2 base all in.
I like seeing it, though, with the Hallucinated Phoenix Scout, of course, with the buff to the Sentry Hallucination. That's something that it's kind of cool because you still see the Stargate play so much. If you're going to do something else, opening with the Sentry, getting the Scout, it's not going to cost you as much of your energy. You can still have that information. We've got Lings and Ravagers on the way. 5 gates about to finish. But that Warp Prism that you were talking about, Ravi, it is done. And it looks like Rail is going to try to bring the pain to his opponent. But I feel like Bly has started cranking out units so fast, and there's so many Zerglings that he's going to need some really dynamite force fields, and I'm not even sure there's enough choke point for him to block off. If those Lings get around the Sentry Immortal, it should rip him to pieces.
Also important to note that because Rail, he sent out the Hallucinated Phoenix, but he didn't actually send it. This is a really small thing, but if you send it around to the other corners, you can also see where the creep is really strong and where the creep is a little bit shorter, so it can maybe affect where you decide to move forward, where you can maybe get into a good position before your opponent's army jumps on you. He's just going to move up through this area where the creep spread is kind of the strongest, and he's going to try and move up this ramp. This is where things get difficult. If you can get up the ramp, there are a lot of great force field opportunities for him. If he can't, Bly's just going to start getting a bigger and bigger army and it becomes more difficult to hold or defend.
Yeah, Bly's been cranking out those units for quite a while, investing all of his larva into the army. Now the first force field is going to come out, the Ling's going to approach. There's the Guardian Shield. Corrosive Vials being thrown, landing on just one of the units. The Zerglings mostly being separated from where those Ravagers are as the Warp Prism starts to pick up those Stalkers and funnel them back, continuing to dodge the Vials as Rail's army stays alive, almost gets that Ravager. Good transfuses so far, picks that one off, dodges the next wave of Vials, and the next Warpin is going to come in. That's a big one. A ton of adepts being added from that Warp Prism. The creep has gone away too, which is going to help a lot. Solid force fields pushing back. All of the Vials are going to miss again for your Dragon.
Yeah, this is just not going that well right now for Bly. Rail has been so cost efficient. We look at the resources lost, it's basically almost, it's like a 800, 900
almost 1,000
more.
resource difference. Very important at this stage of the game, especially since those big power units are still alive. The Sentry's accumulating energy. The Immortals still providing a very solid backbone to this army. And now he's able to close him off with that low ground ramp towards the third base. The drones are coming off the line from the natural to try and stop Rail's advance.
And the Ravagers can't even participate in most of this fight. It's just the drones. They have been able to work their way through all the Adepts, though. It's just Sentries and Immortals left over. Another round of Adepts gets warped in, but at what cost? Flies down to 32 workers. Even if he held here, he would be down in worker supply, and I don't think he's gonna hold. Railroads his way through game number 1. Gets into a very good spot where he likely is going to be able to close this out.
Yep, just saying choo-choo, baby, as they make their way to game 2. Another warp in comes in. Those Ravagers unable to eliminate the Immortals, unable to prevent the Warp Prism from continuing to add more and more to this Protoss force. And nothing else left for him. GG Rail takes game number 1.
I mean, just there's not even that much to say about it, Nate. It was a
He built 3 Immortals, he built a Warp Prism, he went across the map, and he killed him.
Yeah, and it was all just micro. Bly saw it coming. Bly had the Overlord in position.
Yep.
He stopped droning around 47 or 40A, which is like a decently safe number to stop droning. Maybe like sometimes you'll see a Zerg player cut a little bit, like 4 or 5 drones earlier, but that's a pretty decent number to stop droning at. You pump out a lot of units. It was all just about the micro.
Yeah, really good force fields, especially the first time that Bly tried to send the Zerglings down the ramp. All the Ravagers were caught in the back. He broke some of the force fields, but the Ravagers weren't even able to fight. They never got any biles on the army. I don't think a bile ever hit more than maybe 1 or 2 units.
He had more of his own lings than anything else.
Exactly, exactly. The lings on the left side, and by the time the Ravagers could fight, all of the Zerglings were dead.
It is a tough situation like that, and normally you look at like a 2-base all-in and you say, okay, it's just a 2-base all-in. It's not something you do every game. That was a game where, again, I hate to emphasize this so much, but that was such a well-scouted build and everything.
Yeah.
Bly had all the information he needed.
It's not like Bly was caught off guard, yeah.
Rail could honestly do that again, depending on the map, and I would not feel that bad about it.
Rail looked really good in this first game. I mean, build order execution is one thing, but you would say oftentimes that a strategy like this, you kind of want to pocket it somewhere, you want to hide something. Didn't end up happening, was fully scouted and just controlled very well. I feel really good about him going into game number 2. I'm not entirely sure what's up with Bly today, but he's usually the type of player that if he knows what you're up to, you're going to have a really hard time catching him off guard.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit of a weak first game there from him.
It's going to be a bit tough. And it's so funny because Bly was the guy who was saying like, oh, I think this is a bit of a tough group, but overall he's feeling confident. Rail was the one that was saying, I can't beat Bly. It's just not going to happen. I'm just accepting it and thinking about the other players and stuff. Yeah. So it's sort of funny. He's already seen the tables turned a little bit, but we haven't seen really Bly been able to get up to that later stage game where he gets up to the Swarmos that Rail was talking about, because that's the thing that he's afraid of. Well, so maybe his goal is just ended before it ever gets there.
For Bly, this game started and ended on tier 1. Ling Ravager, that's all you got. The Roaches aren't going to do anything against Sentry Immortal, but those biles are going to need to hit much more effectively next game if something similar were to happen.
That is the big thing. And also, if you can catch that army before it actually gets up the ramp and everything. He tried to prevent it from moving up the ramp. And I think as soon as, I was saying this, like as soon as you give up that choke point right there, suddenly your opponent has choke points against you. And that's what we started seeing the force fields really being effective.
Especially because you don't always see Protoss players bring observers with these types of attacks as early as he did. And I think that was also crucial because he was able to eliminate the creep tumors. There was no moment where he stepped forward on creep and got surrounded. It never happened. And I think that sort of play is really cool to see. It's really refreshing. It's really nice. Very well put together game by Rail as we get ready for game number 2. This is our second match here for WCS Winter as we move through the European half of our broadcast.
Piercing eyes of Rail in that picture. Oh my god. Spawning down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, we have the red Zerg player. Oops, I have the wrong score. Let me go ahead and adjust that really quickly. It is going to be our red Zerg player, Bly.
And in the northwest, our blue Protoss player, he is Rail.
Rail definitely looking a lot better the past couple of months. I would say Rail last year, he'd be the player that you'd say like, oh, cool, Rail qualified for Challenger. This is kind of a nice opportunity for him, but wasn't quite really able to turn it into big results. This WCS Winter, I actually really believe that Rail has what it takes to make a really deep run. People ask me about, I guess, people that I think could do really well they don't normally. Rail is one of the first players I think of right now.
Yeah, I think one of the cool parts about WCS Winter is that we get to see a bit more of a broad spectrum in terms of which players from which countries. Even in our European region, we see a lot of these faces over and over again, but I think a guy, especially like Goblin, for example, who's kind of up and coming, you don't see him as much at the WCS events. And I would also put Rail in there. He's a name that's popped up a bit more and more across Challenger, but with the time frame that this takes place, the amount of stages, and we'll be talking a lot about more of that when we get to the Americas group later. Hatch block, bringing down the Proby boys. Gonna tase it out. I think there is like a number of workers you can bring down.
I remember Jack
like
Attack used to do that number, or you do that math. I think it's 5. I think if you start on the hatch almost immediately, I think it's 5 workers will ensure that it gets killed, but it'll finish with next to no hit points.
Yeah.
But if you get the Zealot there, then you're pretty safe.
Good dancing with the Zealot, by the way, to prevent the follow-up evolution chamber block, which can also be just so annoying. What I'm really curious about after this Nexus starts is it going to be the robotics facility again? Will he go for a little bit more of a standard Stargate opening?
Stargate, because he hasn't started Warp Gate. Yeah.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite giveaways, is that if you just don't see Warp Gate technology being researched for a while.
Isn't that a whole thing now, though? Just with the Warp Gate buff, I've heard a lot of Zerg players talking about how Protoss players will pretend to go Stargate by delaying their Warp Gate.
That is so clever.
Because you could delay your Warp Gate by 14 seconds, and then your old build lines up perfectly.
That's so next level. I love that. I have not seen that, but maybe I just haven't been paying close enough attention.
Just waiting to see those 300 IQ plays here at WCS Winter. That's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. So the Stargate is coming in. I believe that Overlord has spotted it, so I should expect this to be a little bit more of a standard game. Could go for the fast Phoenix to try and shut that down. Not going to be a quick Oracle for pressure.
First Phoenix, of course, like you said, going to shut down the Overlords. There's only one Overlord really close or on Rail's actual side of the map. There is a second Overlord moving forward. I was going to say, Zombie Girl was telling me about how a lot of Zerg players have just ceased sending out the second Overlord at this point. They kind of, actually I think it was Wardy that was saying a lot of Zerg players just really don't feel like it's worth sending out the second Overlord, because against most players, they're going to be doing standard stuff, they're going to be going for Stargate and all that, and if they go for the Stargate, they're going to kill off your Overlords anyways, so why bother? But I think versus Rail specifically, it's really worth doing.
So the Phoenix is going to go across. We're going to see how much information Rail can find out as Bly's Zergling is going to check the peripheral bases, making sure there's no early third shenanigans or anything of that sort. The follow-up is a robotics facility with the Twilight Council. Extra gas is being taken. Curious to see what the follow-up here will be. I miss the old Archon drop every game. Those were good times.
Yeah, I think we might actually see something like that, especially with the robotics facility and Twilight going down at the same time. It's definitely a strong possibility. We already have the blind spores coming on up, expecting the Oracle to be making its way across the map, and it is kind of just making its way around, maybe looking for some Zerglings, but funny enough, misses all of them.
Yeah, also we want keeping the Oracle a little bit close to the chest is also nice in case a Ling Flood or something like that does come by that you miss. You want to go across the middle of the map and check the paths.
Oh, does Bly like to Ling Flood sometimes?
I think Bly's I think he's built a Zergling or two in his days.
Okay.
Charge and a Warp Prism, by the way. So the Overlord comes in, sees all of the tech. Templar Archives is on the way as well. But Charge Zealots, of course, always a great harass tool, especially with that Prism support. And this is where you try to use that Oracle to mop up, microwave these Zerglings off of your third base. But the Nexus has not been planted yet. Good slowdown here so far from Bly.
I don't even see the probe coming in. Okay, there it is, finally making its way forward, but not before more Lings show up, and the Lings don't even care about those adapts or the Oracle.
You just want to get the probe. Deny the Nexus, you're killing. He has to send another one from his natural. It messes with the Protoss player's saturation as well. The impact of that is really nice. But interestingly enough, did he finish Charge? Did he cancel Charge and start resonating
Did
waves?
cancel Charge.
Okay, so interesting change up here. It's going straight into Immortal Adept is what it looks like he wants to do. I don't know what to say about that, but the Charge cancel is odd to me.
It's also interesting because he did something because he sort of had to, because his third base is getting so delayed. His minerals are banking up. He added on his extra 2 gateways and went up to 6 gateways before throwing down his third. And again, that's probably just out of necessity because Bly kept denying it. But I do wonder if this is going to go into something more aggressive. He's got his next 2 probes on the way. A lot of pros players do like to stop at 48 and go for like the fake third 2-base all-in. Another gate leaping out on. We'll see. We'll see if that's what his plan is.
Yeah. Still annoying to even do that because his build gets a little bit hamstringed just by having to rebuild those probes from having the third denied that much too. And now the Archon drop comes in. The Queens try to zone away the Warp Prism. The Hydra's coming out makes that a little bit trickier to do the dancing.
And we do see continuous probing. It looks like it's probably not going to be that sort of fake third base and a 2-base all-in. He also realizes that making a bunch of adepts versus a bunch of roaches probably not going to pan out as well.
Now, so the Archons are going to start to attack this 4th base. Hydralisks come down. Now, another Warp Prism is being built at home. That infestation pit you mentioned for Bly is coming in too, so we might see him go into those swarm hosts that you were talking about. Resonating Glaives is done. Could be a bit of a bait play. Bring it around the 1 Warp Prism, pull him one way, use the other one to hit a different base.
Well, creep spread is looking pretty strong over here, and there is an observer out on the map, but
dangerous.
It doesn't look like it's actually with the army. There's a couple of Lings also swinging into the 3rd base, but there's no defenses whatsoever. Gonna be losing a few units.
Yeah, no shield battery either to help keep these probes alive. Oracle is going to swoop in, but not before 4 probes are killed. There's the big warp-ins of the depths. Now, of course, that observer catches up with the army a little bit faster since the movement speed buff in the latest update. Clearing that creep is very important, I think, in this situation. There's the files coming down. First force field's going to get dropped by Rail as he begins to approach Bly's 3rd base. First Archon does get killed. He is mowing his way through this army so far, though.
Getting a lot of good damage done, but as the Ravagers get closer and closer to that Warp Prism, this does become a bit of a danger zone. A couple of the Ravager Corrosive Bombs have already been used, but there we go. We see the Corrosive Bombs come down, land on the Adepts. The Warp Prism dodges out of the way. This is looking to be a bit of a close fight, but I think that Rail is starting to make the progress he needs to.
Rail makes a great save on the Warp Prism, keeping it away as those Vials started to come in. The rest of the army now pushing back towards the 3rd, dodges the next Vial, does lose 1 Adept there to it. But the next Warp-in comes in, the 3rd hatchery is exposed. Don't think Bly was ever able to get anything onto the 4th base, so once this base dies, his economy is going to be extremely hurt. Pushes in front of that Vial.
I won't even hate it if he just gets up the hatchery and saves the drones over here. He's pulling the drones off the line. He has 5 hatches versus a 3-base Protoss player. I feel like you can give up the hatch and just try and defend, but he's going to lose all of these roaches, all these Ravagers, all these Hydras at the 3rd. And now it feels like Rail is starting to snowball.
Rail executing some brilliant attacks here in WCS Winter, getting a great push, shutting down the 3rd base, 3 swarm hosts on the way. One of them is out, but just a handful of Locusts may not be enough with the Adept number on the field. 7 more going to get warped in right outside of the natural expansion. There go 2 more Locusts, pathetically attempting to get anything done against this army, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Fear Dragon Rail with a very strong showing in his first match.
Yeah, looking like he's going to be able to get that 2-0. Bly is giving it his all, but he finally does tap out.
GG! Well played by Rail. 2-0 over one of the, I'd say, most storied veterans of the European StarCraft scene. Bly's been around, it feels like, as long as this game has.
Yeah, exactly. He's been
Probably longer.
He's been around for a very long time. He's been one of those players that hasn't just been kind of there. He's been one of those top performers at certain periods of time. He's taken out a lot of the really top names. But Rail, that kind of up-and-coming player, Rail's also been around for a really long time. Most people knew him by the name of Verdi. Right. It's just that he is now finally starting to get some big results. Yeah,
and I'd say it's still not a player that you would expect to be up there. You know, I think a lot of people, you look at this group, you say, okay, well, Euthermal should be like the favorite-ish here, and then Euthermal Bly makes a lot of sense, but it's going to be Euthermal against Rail, and Bly is actually going to have to go down against Goblin. And I think Goblin might watch this match and be like, well, it seems like some sharp timings. He's having a struggle bus time versus Immortal Sentry today.
That's going to be certainly a lot of fun. As you said, that's going to be the next match. And I'm also really looking forward to that winners match right now.
Yes.
Because funny enough, both of these guys, they were playing in the ladder qualifier for this event. And Rail was one of the few players that actually beat out Euthermal in that ladder qualifier and be able to get up a little bit higher than Euthermal was. And Euthermal was actually giving him a bit of a respect for that. Yep. So I am really looking forward to that. But ladies and gentlemen, you guys can see the schedule. We got that next match set up. It's going to be the lower bracket match first, Goblin versus Bly. We will see you guys in a little bit with more WCS Winter.